Hey guys, what's going on? Digmaster 81 here, and I'm really excited today because we're going to talk about my 2020 rod and reel arsenal. I've wanted to do this for a really long time, but I kind of needed to buy some more gear before I did. I still have some stuff I need to buy, and I'll talk about that when I'm talking about my rods and reels. But let's get started. So, first one I want to talk about today, we're actually going to talk about spinning rods first, then we're going to kind of move up in power and, actually end up talking about my 8-foot swim bait rod. So let's get started. So the first one I'm going to talk about is kind of my favorite rod that I've owned. It's actually probably, if I had to take 3 rods with me, this is probably going to be one of them. What this is a Megabass Orochi XX spinning rod. This is actually, they call this the Stinger Shot. Megabass, if you guys don't know, Megabass, has these unique names for their rods. And this is the Stinger Shot. The reason why they call it Stinger Shot is that tip is very, very soft. And that really helps when you're fishing in sometimes I'm drop shot in 30 feet of water. Is sometimes even with such an ultra sensitive rod like this, sometimes you can't even feel that bite. So you can actually watch your tip. And that tip on this rod is extremely soft. If I ever, went up and fished Great Lakes, I would fish this rod. And I actually have that paired with a really inexpensive reel. This is actually a Shimano Noski. And what I found with spinning reels, I've been, fishing for a while, and probably 10 years ago, I probably would fish, a $200 Stradic or a more expensive Daiwa reel. But nowadays, basically all that technology from those higher price reels is actually in these lower price reels. This is only a $100 reel, but it fishes this reel fishes like a Stradic. Which is actually another $100 on top of this reel. And the reason why I like this reel is one, it's smooth, and it has a really smooth drag. That's the biggest thing with the spinning reel is you need a really smooth drag. I have it spooled with mostly braid, and it actually has about a 50-foot top shot of a 6-pound sniper. Actually, no, I think that's 7-pound sniper. Excuse me. But yeah, and actually all my spinning reels are these are either the Noski or Sahara. The Sahara, the only difference between this and the Sahara is a couple things that make this a little more saltwater friendly. But the Sahara is an awesome reel as well. But yeah, so next one we're going to talk about is actually a rod I actually just resurrected. Actually, the top guide, actually the one of the ceramic guides actually popped out of the tip, and I actually just replaced the tip, and now I'm going to use this for a 2020 season. This is a St. Croix Mojo Bass. I used to be really big on St. Croix rods until I started buying some other brands and liking the other things that other brands had to offer. But for someone that's just getting into fishing, someone that wants to gravitate towards a brand, I think St. Croix is a really nice brand to start with. Reason being is they're just the quality for the price is very good. You rarely find any inconsistencies in St. Croix rods. It's a 7-1 medium power fast action, and this rod really to me is any of my finesse baits that are weightless or Neko rigging. And the reason why I say that is this rod, it's a fast action. To me, it kind of leans more on the extra fast side. So any of those baits that have weight in the front, like if I have a peg Texas rig weight or a shaky head, for example, sometimes that weight can actually can throw the hook out of the fish's mouth, just because there's something in front of that fish's mouth, swinging around. So for this rod, for that I really don't use this rod. But for weightless Senkos, wacky rigging and Neko rigging is what I use this rod for. Sensitivity is not going to amaze you. It's not going to be like the most sensitive rod you've ever used. But in terms of build quality, action, and consistency, Mojo Bass is really nice, so I'd recommend that rod. The next one we're going to talk about, I'm going to try to speed this up because we got 20-something rods to talk about. The next one is I bought this rod kind of to alleviate the issues that I have with that Moja Bass. Probably the most popular rod series out right now. This is actually a Dobyns Fury, and this is actually the 703. So what that means for people that don't know, about Dobyns rods, or Powell, for example, is 703 stands for 7 foot, so 7 and 0, 7 foot rod, and then 3 is actually a 3 power. So a 3 power in Dobyns spinning rod lineup is a medium action. And it's basically rated the same as that St. Croix in terms of lure weight and everything. But the thing about this rod that I like is, and it has a soft tip as well, but it bends further into the blank. So when I'm fishing baits like a shaky head, or I'm fishing a Senko with like a really light weight, like if I peg it, that rod actually bends further into the blank. So it's actually it's harder for those fish to throw that bait. So yeah, this is basically what I bought this rod for, and I actually really like it. For guys, again, getting into fishing, they want to buy a more expensive rod, around that $100 price point, which for most guys is pretty expensive. Dobyns Fury is great. I really like it. And the last spinning rod I'm going to talk about, this is actually a rod that I bought. I don't know how long ago I bought this rod. This is a Cabela's Tournament ZX rod. I actually have some of their cranking rods, and I was like, I really just want to try, a graphite, regular graphite rod just to see how it performs. And I actually really enjoy this rod. For being $100 and for being a store brand rod, it actually is fairly sensitive. It's got a good action. It's got good components. Nice reel seat. This is actually 6 foot. Actually, I forgot to talk about the length on that Dobyns rod. The Dobyns rod's a 7-footer. Well, maybe I did talk about it. And then St. Croix is 7'1". This is actually a 6'10". And I use this shorter rod. This is for dock skipping, skipping docks. It's kind of the same power as the others, but because it's shorter, it just shuts off a little quicker by nature. So I really love fishing docks with this rod. That's pretty much the only thing I fish it with. And it doesn't have a reel right now because Christian has my reel, and that's a Daiwa RG spinning reel in the 2500 size. For spinning reels for bass fishing, if you want to start out with a good size, usually Shimano reels in that 3000 size are perfect, and then Daiwa reels in that 2500 size or 3000, depending how big you want your reel. The 2500 is kind of more like that compares more to that 3000 Shimano, and then the Daiwa 3000 is pretty much the biggest. And I've used those for a while. The Shimano and Daiwa spinning reels, and for spinning reels, talk about spinning reels. Casting reels are a totally different story. But Daiwa and Shimano spinning reels are far and ahead better than any spinning reel that's out in the market. Just gearing efficiency, smoothness, drag, smoothness, just basically everything you can think of. And if you guys have any specific questions on reels, just PM me. I know about a lot of gear. Alright, so now we're going to move on to casting rods, and I kind of have this segmented in a certain way, and I'll kind of explain what I'm talking about. So the first two rods I'm going to talk about actually are rods that I just got, and kind of made me want to make this video. So these two rods, like I said, I just bought. I haven't used them, but I know they're going to be killer rods. These are Arc Lancer rods. So Arc Rods is a company that came out like 2 years ago or something like that. Randall Tharp started representing them and things like that, and I was kind of skeptical. I was like, I don't know if I want to get into all that thing, get into another brand of rods. But Black Friday came around this year at Tackle Warehouse. I was like, and they were selling these for like $50. I was like, screw it. I bought 2 of them, paired them with some really cheap reels. These are Shimano Canons, and both of these rods they're actually 610 rods, 610 medium, and then the taper is actually regular. And I want to talk about that for a minute because a lot of people think a regular taper is just a Modfast rod. The regular taper to me is where you have, you almost have what I would call a working tip. That's what I call it. It's probably not what a rod maker calls it. But what that is, when you're working a bait like a topwater or a jerk bait, something that you're twitching constantly, you only have that little bit of tip that's working, and that's awesome. So this rod, when you're working the bait, it feels like an extra fast rod, which is what you want when you're working the bait. Now, an extra fast rod really sucks when you hook up on that fish, because when you hook up on that fish, the bend in that rod can come out really easily, and it's kind of like, you know, when you hook up on that fish, you really want like a cranking rod, like a moderate action. The awesome thing about a regular taper is when you have that bend when you're working the bait, when you hook up on that fish, I want to break this rod, it's a $50 rod. But you can see it bends. It has like a mod fast bend. Mod fast to moderate bend. Should be more like a moderate, it bends all the way down here. It bends a lot. So that's awesome. These rods, there's going to be killer jerkbait and topwater rod. I have one spool with 12-pound fluorocarbon for jerkbaits, and I have one spool with 30-pound braid for topwaters. And whenever I fish topwaters, I fish about a foot long leader, 20-pound mono, for so those baits don't get tangled up on the cast or anything like that. So next rods we're going to talk about these 4, 5, or 6 rods. They're actually rods that are pretty much all-purpose rods. I fish out of the kayak a lot. Most of my other rods are pretty technique specific, but these rods in particular can do a lot of different things. So the first two I'm going to talk about are my St. Croix Avids. Like I said, I used to be a huge St. Croix guy, and these are rods that have stuck with me for a really long time. Especially this one. This one I've had. This was the first really high-priced rod I ever bought. It's basically what it is a 6.6 medium heavy, fast action. And the thing about this rod is it throws everything. Like, I mean, I used to throw so many different things on it. Now for me, I throw spinnerbaits, chatterbaits. It's pretty much what I throw on it right now. And it's traditional medium heavy rod. Nothing really much to say about it. I could throw some smaller jigs on it if I felt like it. It's a 6.3-to-1 reel. This is actually a Shimano Sitica D. Super old reel, but kicks butt. It's like an old Corrado, basically. And then this rod, you know, after liking that rod, I bought this rod. This is another St. Croix Avid. It's a 7-foot medium heavy. Just, you know, got 6 inches on the other rod. But the thing about this rod that I found is, you know, this is a lot newer model. That's a really old one. This rod, you know, as St. Croix grew as a brand, they kind of got stiffer. This rod is stout. Like, this is a stout rod. For a 7-foot medium heavy, I mean, I would really more call it like a heavy. If you're talking about like Dobbins rods, it's either a 4 or a 5 power. I mean, maybe even a 5 power. Like, it is. I mean, I would not throw I would not throw half ounce and actually I would not throw 3/4 ounce on this rod. I throw 3/4 ounce spinnerbaits and chatterbaits on this rod all the time. This rod also this reel is also an 8-1-to-1. So I throw Texas rigs, jigs, any single hook bait. I also throw, when I'm throwing straight braid, I'll throw buzz baits on this rod too. I've also actually, in a pinch, I've thrown a whopper plopper on this rod, like a big whopper plopper. The reel on this rod is actually a Shimano SLX. Best $100 reel there is. It used to be like, you know, there used to be some competition when Shimano had the Canons, and Daiwa had some reels, and you know, all the reels are very similar at the $100 price point. This reel just blows everything out of the water. This reel's a boss. I mean, to me, this feels like a Corrado. It feels like a cheap Corrado. That's what I'll say. And I wouldn't say cheap. I don't say cheap in a bad way. Just made with different materials. Anyways, and it's spool with 30 pound braid. So, next rods we're going to talk about are rods I used to have a really huge gripe with, but then I bought these and I actually really liked them. So I actually had a previous bad experience with the Duckett rod. Then I was heard some people talking. I was actually talking to some guys at the boat ramp. They said that Duckett kind of revamped their rods, you know, did some changes. And I was like, you know what, it's about that time to buy some, you know, rods, you know, just buy them again, just check them out. And they were on sale, so I was like, okay. and also to kind of depart from Shimano reels. You know, most of these are Shimanos, besides that Daiwa that Christian has. So what these are Duck Hit Micro Magic rods. They're both 6'9" medium heavies, and just in general, you know, a medium heavy is a really versatile rod for throwing a lot of different things. And these are 6'9", so actually these are rods that I actually throw up against cover and things like that. Extremely versatile. I love throwing these in the kayak. The reels on these are actually Lew's Tournament MV reels, which I think they actually just discontinued, or they're gonna make some new ones. Hopefully they make some new ones, because this is probably my favorite reel Lew's makes. I actually have a guy that I fish with sometimes that actually all he fishes is these Lew's MV reels. They cast great. The only problem I have with them is when I actually put these on some punching rods, like flipping and punching rods, they don't have like that, you know, just wrenching power of, you know, the Corrado or the Tatula, and you know, I don't really expect them to, because, you know, they're a lot smaller reel. I think they're more of like a, you know, finessey to all-purpose reel versus like a heavy-duty flipping reel. But they're awesome. So 6'9" medium heavy rods. Both of these Lew's reels. One of them's a 7-1, one's an 8-1. Do everything that those St. Croix do, except I will throw, besides buzz baits, I don't throw buzz baits with fluorocarbon. One of these is going to be spooled with 15-pound fluorocarbon, one's going to be spooled with 17. Spinner baits, chatter baits, Texas rigs, little jigs, and I'll actually throw, when I'm fishing docks, when I'm fishing in heavy cover, I will throw square bills in this rod too, bigger square bills with stouter hooks. So the next rod I want to talk about is a really interesting rod, because it used to be kind of like that St. Croix and those Duckets, where I threw a lot of things on this rod, and now I just throw only a couple things on this rod. This is actually another Megabass Orochi XX. This is actually what they call the Extreme Mission Type F, or EMTF for short. What this is a 7'5". It's a Megabass. It's basically a 5-power. Their 5-power, which is quite a bit softer than a Dobbins or a Powell's 5-power rod. To me, and actually I don't have a reel right now. Actually plan on getting a really high-end reel for this rod. Probably the lowest I get is probably a Chronarch, but I'm also looking to get like a Daiwa Skis or something like that. Definitely something that, you know, this rod deserves, something really nice, really light. But I throw two things in this rod right now. I throw a football jig, actually three things. Football jigs, finesse jigs, you know, not true finesse, but, you know, kind of jigs with lighter hooks. And then I also throw biffle head. I actually started throwing a biffle head last year. I actually caught a couple fish at Paint Creek on a biffle head, and it's slowly becoming one of my favorite techniques because it takes like no effort whatsoever. You just need a really nice sensitive rod. This is my favorite, you know, right now this is my favorite biffle head rod. And I've been starting to throw football jigs more. And this rod is going to be spooled with 15-pound, actually probably 16-pound Sniper. The next rod is really interesting because this is also a Megabass Extreme Mission Type F, except it's in the Levante line. Actually, these are both first gens. That was a first gen Orochi. This is a first gen Levante. But the difference about this rod versus the other rod is, you know, I bought this rod because I really liked that other rod, and I thought it was going to be very similar, and it's not the case. It definitely has the same kind of taper, but this one actually just feels like it has a little bit more horsepower. So what I did with this rod, and it also has normal size guides versus the semi-micros and the other rod. So what I did with this rod is I put braid on this rod. I'm going to fish this braid leader. This is my Texas rigging rod, and this is like an amazing, amazing Texas rigging rod. I mean, it is for anything under half ounce. Actually, I would probably more say like anything under 7/16 of an ounce, so 3/8, 5/16, quarter ounce Texas rigs. This rod is ridiculous. I mean, it is a really, really nice rod. I've also, in a pinch, I've thrown spinner baits, chatter baits on this rod. It's a little long, but I've done it before. And the reel I pair with that, this is a Shimano Corrado 70. Just an amazing reel. In the 8:1 gear ratio. If I had to pick, if any of these casting rods, if I had to pick one that just, you know, felt the best, like in my hand, just feels the best, this is it. With the combination of this Megabass handle, kind of just this split grip with a long, you know, butt section, and then this really small reel. I'm sorry, my chair is like really loud. This is just an amazing. I can't really talk about it. Like, I can't even speak. Like, it's just, this is my favorite Texas rigging rod. And if you're looking for a Texas rigging combo, this is it. This is, you know, amazing. Another interesting rod I want to talk about is kind of the same story with that Levante. I actually bought this rod for frogging. This is a Dobyns Fury 735, and I was kind of bummed because I started frogging with this rod, and I quickly realized that this rod is heavy. I mean, it's not as tip heavy as some other rods I've used, because Dobyns is really good. The thing about Dobyns is they're really good with balancing their rods, but it is kind of tip heavy for frogging, especially when you're frogging with, and when you're frogging, you have really short snaps of that rod to make that frog walk. And I found it really exhausting to throw this rod. So then I was like, okay, so what am I use this rod for? So then I started actually flipping with it. And I actually had some success. You know, I caught some fish, you know, flipping creature baits and, you know, things like that. Flipping like half ounce, like anything that the Levante couldn't do, I started doing with this rod. And it just was like, I would flip for like 3 hours, and I'd be like, dang, this is kind of heavy, I gotta put it down. It's just kind of a heavy rod, and not bashing the Dobyns. I mean, it's a nice stick. But then I kind of was like, you know, I want to find something where I'm not really, you know, working the bait too much. I was thinking, you know, reaction baits. And I was looking at the lure rating. It throws up to 1.5 ounces. I was like, A-rig. So I started throwing A-rig with 1/8 ounce heads, up to 3/16 and 1/4 ounce heads. This is like my favorite A-rigging rod. And it's awesome because compared to those giant A-rig rods that you typically think of, this rod is really light compared to those rods. And it actually loads up and throws those A-rigs, like 1/8 ounce heads and 3/16 ounce heads. It throws those A-rigs extremely well. And the reel I have on it, this is a Shimano Corrado I in the 6:3:1. When I was flipping, I actually had a Tattulo on this. But now that I'm throwing like a reaction type bait, I figured out slowing down that reel that has a lot of power. This is one of the most powerful reels you can buy. A-rigging rod, this is sweet. If you're looking for just getting to A-rigging, it's a sick rod. So the next one I want to talk about, you know, mainly the reels and rods and reels I've been talking about are Shimano and Daiwa, and I have a couple outliers in here as well. But one I had to buy just to review it and, you know, check it out. Oh, that was stuck there. Is a 13 fishing combo. And I actually had a Gander Mountain closing in my area, and I decided it was the opportunity to buy, you know, kind of splurge a little bit and buy a 13 fishing combo. Not that they're expensive, but just, you know, kind of to fork the money into something that I didn't think would actually work. And this is kind of what got me started into testing rods, you know, telling people about them and things like that. This is actually a 13 fishing Omen Black 2. It's a 7.6 medium heavy, and simply this is my jig rod and light flipping and pitching, with weights between 1/2 ounce and 3/4 ounce. And super simple. The reel, this is actually a 13 fishing Inception. For the money, this reel is crazy good. The only reason I like the SLX better is the side plate stays on. This actually detaches, and the way it attaches and detaches just sucks. I've actually had some times where even though this side plate is in the closed position, this side plate would pop off. And it was actually really scary because I was in the kayak and it was like in the bottom of my kayak. half of my reel's missing, So that's scary. I kind of have to knock 13 fishing for something like that. But for 13 fishing to come out with just a bomb lineup of reels super quickly, I thought was really sweet. And this thing casts crazy good. I told you this was flipping and jigs and stuff. I've casted jigs like so far with this reel. For 120 bucks, it's a nice reel. And it's spooled 50-pound braid, which I tie leaders on. Most of the rods that I've talked about so far that I have with braid, I usually tie on leaders depending on the technique, between 12 and 20. The A-rig, sometimes I'll throw 25. Count fluorocarbon, of course. So the next one we're going to talk about, two rods. And these are rods. This is basically, I was kind of more or less disappointed with the Dobyns. Not that it's a bad rod, I just kind of bought it for something and I wasn't satisfied with what I was using it for. So what I did is I went out and bought some of these Powell rods, because I kind of wanted that same action that the Dobyns had. It's a really nice action for frogging, but this was heavy. So I was like, what can I buy that's lighter, that has that same action? And I bought this rod. This is a Powell 736. It's actually a power higher, but it's way lighter. I mean, this rod, for being 7'3", is fairly light. And the awesome thing about this rod, the thing you want with a frog rod is you want a rod that has, some tip. Then after that tip, it's just straight a pull cue. I mean, it just rips fish out of cover. And that's exactly what this rod is. I haven't had a ton of frog fish this year, well, last year per se, but the ones I have hooked, I mean, this thing just rips them out of cover. And the reason is, not only is this rod really stiff, it's probably the stoutest rod that I own, but the rods that Powell makes are just very springy. What I mean by that is, like, they really like to, when they're in a bent position, they really want to come back to their position very fast. They're very quick. And that's something I can't say about some of these other rods. Megabass is sort of the same way. That 13 is kind of that way as well. But having rods that are really springy and really quick are very good for fishing heavy cover. Not saying they bend. What I'm talking about is I kind of want to explain this a little bit. Not the taper of the rod per se, because this rod, I mean, it bends, and it's kind of like an extra fast too. But maybe this one bends a little bit more. Let's see here. This is another Powell. Is no matter how far it bends, it wants to come back to its position extremely fast. And that's not because it's an extra fast taper per se, where it only bends, in the upper, quarter section of the rod. But no matter how much it bends, it just wants to return to its original location. It has a ton of power, and that's what I like about Powell's. It's kind of hard to explain. If you have any questions about that, you can PM me about it. The next Powell rod that I have is my 775, and this is my punching rod, or heavy flipping. And punching around my area is not really like, Okeechobee or California Delta punching. It's more, a lot sparser grass. Probably the heaviest weight I use is like an ounce, maybe an ounce and a quarter, and this 70-75 does it perfectly. Same thing with this frog rod, is it's got a little bit of tip, but the rest of that rod is just a pull cue. I mean, and I use a Daiwa Tatula CT on that rod, in the 8-1-1, which is also the same reel I'm gonna put on this rod when I buy it. This reel and the Curados, that being the Curado K, Curado I, those are the only reels that I've found that can really withstand that heavy flipping, heavy punching. They just are really heavy duty reels that can, withstand that punishment. Which I can't say the same for the Lew's and some other brands I've tried. I've actually tore up a ton of reels punching and stuff like that a long time ago. The last category of rods we're going to get to is cranking rods. I know this is like the craziest rod and reel arsenal ever, but let's get into it. So, first crank rod I want to talk about is probably my favorite actually. what this is, and I talked about this earlier with that Tournament ZX. I have a lot of Tournament ZX cranking rods, and they're actually really nice sticks. This is a Tournament ZX 7-1 medium moderate action rod. And what I like about this rod is it just bends. It's a buggy whip. I mean, it just, when, I'm not going to do it now because I don't want to break it, but is when I really, that was a ghost. When I really hook up onto a fish, the whole rod bows over on that crankbait. I actually hooked almost a 4-pound smallmouth on this rod last season, and this thing handled it beautifully. The reel I have, everyone's favorite reel, not really, the Scorado G and the 6:1 gear ratio. The thing about this reel that, you know, a lot of people hate it because it's not as good as the Corrado E, and you know, I would agree, and the I is even better than this reel. But this reel is actually really good. It casts well, cranks well. Is it smooth? Not really. I don't really care about that though. But if you're looking for a cheap cranking reel and somebody's selling it, I'd pick it up. I'd pick it up for 80 bucks. I picked these up for like 80 bucks. I actually have 2 of them. So yeah. So the next one we'll talk about, this is a Daiwa. I keep hearing noises. I think my house is haunted. This is actually a Team Daiwa S casting rod. What this is a 7'7" medium action rod with a regular taper. So regular taper, very similar to those arc rods. But in this case, Daiwa's regular taper, it doesn't really have that fast action in the tip. It's more just like a moderate action. So basically what this rod for is crankbaits. I throw crankbaits up to about 3/4 of an ounce in this rod. That's it. I mean, the crankbait rod is really simple. You know, pretty much throwing any type of crankbait in that weight range. And this is just one step up from the ZX. Next cranking rod I want to talk about. This is a oddity because it's a glass rod. It's the only glass. Actually, some of these are composites, but this is the only 100% glass rod that I own. It says it's a composite. This is a Quantum Torque KVD, the first gen of these rods, first generation. And they advertise them being composite, but they're really straight glass. I mean, you feel it. It feels like glass. It's soft like glass. And this is actually a 7'4", medium heavy, moderate rod. Throwing crankbaits. I actually throw the same cranks on this rod as I do that Daiwa rod. The reason why I would throw this rod over the Daiwa rod is there's a specific period of the year, which to me is kind of around post spawn. There's like this very niche window in post spawn where the fish just, they really will only hit reaction baits. You kind of have to get them to bite. But the problem is they won't really hit that bait really well. Most of the time you're skin hooking fish, and I feel like that glass actually, I land more fish in this glass versus the graphite. Pretty much other months out of the year I usually hook up really well on those graphite rods. This is kind of a rod to me, like if I'm on a crankbait bite and my buddy, you know, is like, hey, I need a cranking rod, you know, I probably will let them use this rod. The reel on this rod, this is a Quantum Energy. A lot of people sleep on Quantum reels, and they are, honestly, they're not my favorite reels, but they're nice. Quantum, the thing about Quantum is they make all their bearings in factory. So when you pick up a Quantum reel and you reel it, I mean, it is like really, really smooth. And that's what I found with this reel. The downfall for me for this reel is the braking system is not like amazing. And sometimes I have trouble tuning it versus the other reels. I kind of had that same issue with the 13 fishing reel, but you know, most of the time I'm flipping jigs or flipping, you know, plastics with that rod, so it wasn't really an issue in my opinion. This rod, you know, I'm constantly casting all day, so I found it to be kind of an issue. Not knocking the Quantum, it's a nice reel. If I had more of them, I'd probably know how to tune them better. But that's my Quantum. dwindling down here. We got 3 rods here. So the next one I want to talk about, this is another Cabela's Tournament ZX rod. This is a 7'5" medium heavy cranking rod. This is rated from 3/8 to 1.5 ounces. And I really did not, when I bought this rod, I bought this rod as the same time as I have a 710 cranking rod over there. And I bought this rod to throw like 6XDs, but I found that 710 rod throws the 6XD, the 8 and the 10 really, really well. So I was kind of, thinking like, what do I use with this rod? And I do still throw 6XDs on this rod sometimes because I throw those on braided leader, which I'll talk about that with the other rod combo. So I was like, what do I throw on this rod? And I still have to get a reel for it, but this is going to be my big topwater rod. Of course, with my other topwater stick, I can't throw a whopper plopper. I can't throw the pompadour. I can't throw some of those Megabass baits like the Eye Loud or the Eye Wing, which is a bait I actually want to try this year. Can't throw those on that rod, so I'm going to throw on this big cranking rod. Those baits have treble hooks. I threw a whopper plopper on this rod with a different reel one day, and it casted extremely well. So this is probably going to be my dedicated big topwater rod, and I'll throw a 6XD on it as well, just depending on what I'm doing. If I'm not cranking, of course, probably throwing the big topwater. This kind of a rod that only really will come out, on a really good bite. Or actually, I'm fishing. I'm actually going to visit, sneak peek what I'm doing and have planned. I might be attending, I'll be going to fish Lake Chickamauga sometime soon, so that's a rod that'll definitely come to play, I think, if they're hitting topwater. So, 2 rods left. The next rod I want to talk about, this is my Magnum crankbait rod. This is a Tournament ZX 710 heavy. It's rated from 5/8 to 2¼ ounces. I think it's a little lighter than that rating. I mean, it feels heavy when I throw a 10XD in this rod, but that's what I throw on this rod. I throw a 10XD, the 8XD. I can throw the 6XD on this rod or the other rod. Any of the giant cranks I'm throwing on this rod. I've also thought about throwing like gigantic topwaters. Most notably like the Whopper Plopper 190, which is more of a musky bait, but I could probably throw that on this rod. But one thing I want to talk about is the reel that I use on this rod, and then also the line. We'll talk about the reel first. So this is the only Abu Garcia that I own. I'm actually going to buy another Abu Garcia for that other rod, that other ZX, just because I haven't had one in a while. I just want to see what they're producing, what they've been producing lately. But this is a Revo Winch Gen 3. This reel, for some reason, like I used to think like the ultimate cranking reels were the Corrado, and then followed by the Tatula, and like the BB1 too. The BB1's in there as well. But I started throwing this reel. I bought this reel for like 99 bucks. They were on sale like a really long time ago. For some reason they were on sale. Like it was before the 4th gen came out. But I bought this reel, and this thing cranks like a 10XD like it's nothing. Like, and that could be attributed to the low gear ratio. But it's also because this reel just has huge gears, and it feels like it basically takes a lot of the work out of cranking. And for cranking, I don't know about the new Revo Gen 4 Revo winch, but I've been a huge fan of this reel. I don't know if I could replace it. If I did replace it, it would probably be with another Corrado. But it's alright, I like it. It was broken for a little while, then I kind of fixed it. I talked to some guys and did some things to it. You can hear it, it's kind of really noisy. But other than that, it cranks like crazy. And then the line I throw on is actually a 30-pound braid, and I was talking about this a little bit with the other Cabela ZX rod. But to me, these giant crankbaits are more like swim baits. They have large hooks, they have really big meaty hooks. And if you're throwing like 12-pound fluoro that's really stretchy, well, more stretchy than braid per se, is I don't think you can get those I don't think you can get those hooks and those fish with that stretchy line. I feel like braid leader is the way to go. And with a soft glass composite rod like this, pulling hooks out of fish or ripping their mouth too much is a non-issue. So that's that rod. And this rod for 710, I mean it's a 710 rod, but this rod casts crazy far. I probably cast further with this rod than probably any rod I own or have owned. This is my first Magnum crankbait rod. The last rod I want to talk about is a rod that's probably going to get switched around a little bit. What this is another Megabass Orochi XX. I actually bought all these Megabasses at the same time, with the exception of the Levante. This is their 8-foot Leviathan. This is my first swimbait rod. I haven't caught a fish on a swimbait, like a big swimbait yet, but I'm trucking along, I'm trying to learn new baits, trying to learn new techniques and things like that. And this is a heck of a first swimbait rod. Definitely a little bit overkill for your first swimbait rod, but it was on sale and I picked it up. It is so light. Like, I mean, I talked about that, some of my rods in this collection being a little tip heavy. This rod is not even close. I could probably actually punch with this rod if I felt like. If I was throwing like 2.5 ounce weights, Okeechobee punching, California Delta punching, this is probably what I would use. I mean, it is a really stout stick. It's rated from 2 to 8 ounces. Actually, it says 1/2 to 8 ounces. I don't know if I'd throw that in, probably like, I'd say more like 2 to 8 ounces. And I really feel like this rod, it gets overloaded when you throw over 6 ounces. I don't have those baits yet, but I was throwing 6 ounces with it, like 6 ounces of lead, and which is a little different, of course. But I found that this rod is kind of overloaded when you get over 6 ounces. But right now I've been throwing S-Wavers, the 200 S-Wavers with this rod, which is about a 3.5 ounce bait. Really nice weight to throw. I plan on getting more swim baits. Basically, this is my treble hook swim bait rod. This is what it's designed for. It's not a hood rod. It's not a jig hook bait rod. Mainly hard baits. And the reel I have on this rod, this is a Shimano Carta 300. This is actually on here for the time being. This is actually going to become my HUD reel, and then I'm probably going to get a different reel for this rod, probably something in that 7 to 1 gear ratio range, just so I can really be reactive with those glide baits and bull shads, things like that. So yeah. So that's it, guys. That is my 2020 rod and reel arsenal. Like I said, on the rods that don't have reels, I'm probably going to buy some reels for those. I might give you an update in a different video. Like my page, subscribe. If you have any questions about this gear or any kind of fishing question in general, put it in the comments or PM me, or on my Instagram. The Instagram is DinkMaster81 as well. And for the few people that appreciate, what I do and subscribe, I really do appreciate you guys. Hopefully this is going to be a crazy 2020 season. I'm going to try to do as much fishing as I can. College has been kicking my butt, but, I'll catch you all later, man.